Hey everybody, Bob Lazaro from All Things Leland. Thanks for joining us. Today's guest is the Executive Director of the Good Shepherd Center, Katrina Knight, and we're going to talk about something that's complex and difficult, which is the issue of homelessness and the services available to folks who are in need of shelter, long-term shelter, health and mental health services, etc. Katrina, thanks for joining us.
Yes, happy to be here.
Let's dive right into it. I mean, you all have been around since 1983, started as a soup kitchen, and it's expanded into a wide variety of services, et cetera. I know you have a shelter and you work to get people from homeless to house and feeding and medical clinic and also mental health services because it's not as simple as giving somebody a bed. I mean,
Right,
that much
absolutely.
that much I
Yes.
do know. So why don't we just start at the beginning with shelter eligibility and capacity and what are the requirements, et cetera.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, honestly, the basic requirement is that someone is quite literally homeless. They don't have someone to go stay with.
Mhm.
They've lost what they say is a safe place for human habitation.
Hmm.
So, it can be that someone's having to sleep in their car. It's not always that they're literally sleeping on the wo in the woods or on the street, but that
Sure.
that certainly would be the case. Sometimes someone has been doubled up or overcrowding with others because they lost their housing, but then found sort of an overcrowding situation with a
Right.
family member, a neighbor, and then eventually that situation tends to fall apart or break down.
Sure.
And so when that time comes that that household literally has no safe place to be, they become eligible for emergency shelter and can come to us. There aren't any requirements around, where you were last renting or what
Right.
have you. But most of our folks hail from either New Hanover or Brunswick County, with
Okay.
an exception being some of our homeless veterans who might come more from Onslow County or a little bit further out.
Sure. I mean, and have you seen trends with more families with kids heading your way who have lost apartments, have lost their homes, et cetera?
We have seen some increase in homeless families with children. I would say really since the advent of COVID, you know, rental prices are still very much kind of out of control for a
Sure.
lot of just regular folk, in our
Hmm.
community. And so it's gone on for some years now where, maybe folks were spending more than the recommended 30% of their income on
Hmm.
housing, but they were kind of making ends meet,
Sure.
cover their housing and their other expenses. But even today, anecdotally, we hear and experience stories where um, the landlord sells the property and
Okay.
the new rents are hundreds of dollars more a month, or the landlord realizes they can garner and kind of set whatever price they want and
Hmm.
find takers for that. And so
Okay.
sometimes just to stay in the same apartment
Sure.
rental situation, folks would have to pay out $300. Sometimes we're seeing situations now where the rent is going up $500 a month
Okay. All
overnight.
right.
And
Sure.
so, people's incomes don't jump in keeping with that. And
No.
so families are very affected by that, as our seniors and other folks,
Hmm.
quite literally feeling priced out of the community that they've lived in for so many years.
And, yeah, and part of the mission of the Good Shepherd Center is to help homeless to be housed. I mean,
Mhm.
so what is that process, case management steps, et cetera, to help someone who says, I need help? So maybe it's, some financial education, it's how
Mhm.
to, manage your money, et cetera.
Right. It's all the things.
Okay.
We take really seriously being that safety net for our neighbors in their time of crisis, but we really feel like if there was any community that can do more and better by people than that, it really is our Cape Fear community. And so we really started, I would say, learning in about 2008 best practices around expediting successful moves out of homelessness and back to housing again. And so, over these ensuing years, we've really built up a team of what we call case manager slash
Mhm.
housing specialists. And so today we have four full-time individuals and a supervisor. And so everyone who comes to us, whether they're staying with us overnight or maybe just accessing our daytime shelter services, they are in someone's caseload.
Okay.
And those team members, they have the very um, heartening but very challenging role of no
Sure.
matter who is sitting on the other side of that desk, whether it is a senior, whether it is a veteran who hasn't been all that stable in their housing since the
Right.
Vietnam War, whether it's a two-parent family, a single mother-headed household, somebody with significant disabilities, they have the job of figuring out, okay, how do I help this person navigate limited options, albeit
Okay.
limited options, and help them make that successful return back to housing. And so it is different household to household, but it almost certainly requires taking a look at, okay, what income is currently coming in? Are there mainstream or other resources that this individual or household is eligible for
Mm-hmm.
that they haven't figured out on their own how to navigate or they don't even realize they're eligible for?
Sure.
That would, either boost income or take some of the pressure off of the limited income.
Sure.
So that
I,
could be
I get it.
safety.
A lot of times folks, I mean, I see it in a whole bunch of different other aspects
Mhm.
of programs that people just are not aware.
Right, right.
And
Or,
so,
they're already feeling kind of defeated. It just feels like a huge personal failure to have lost your housing.
hmm
And so, we're meeting people not only at the worst chapter in their lives, but they can feel
sure.
very discouraged and beaten down, and it can kind of feel like some of these processes are unnecessarily complicated or overcomplicated, almost to
hmm
deter people from applying. For
hmm
example, if you've ever heard someone talk about navigating the disability assistance process,
Right.
you almost could not design it to be more complicated for anyone,
Sure.
honestly, and a very long wait. So it's looking at income and connecting folks with any number of things they're eligible for, not just income or benefits related. Sometimes there are other needs within the family, whether it's,
hmm
childcare, educational sorts of things, employment readiness sorts of things. Again, if somebody has special needs in the mix, that's going to
Sure.
take us a certain direction.
hmm
The affordable housing search, that is something that almost every household needs some hand holding through. Again,
Sure.
we don't have the inventory of affordable options.
Right.
Even for our folks where there are two earners in the family, they don't have as many options, especially if they're trying to stay within a certain school district so that their
Yep.
kids can maintain their friendships, their teacher, their school family. That's very important to a lot of our parents, that while everything else has been turned upside down, that
hmm
the children's school not be interrupted or changed if we
Right.
can help it. So all those things kind of come into play, but it almost always is a combination of some intensive case management, uh, connecting with landlords. We have relationships with landlords, whether they are property managers of many units,
hmm
or maybe it's just someone who owns grandma's old house next
Right.
door,
Yeah.
one unit.
Yeah.
Um, we're making those connections. We're taking folks to view units, inspect them, helping to fill out applications, sometimes paying for application fees, which
Right.
really nickel and dime people who don't have a lot of resources. And then whenever possible, we are combining all that effort with some financial assistance. And that can be everything from just a utility deposit.
Right.
Some households don't need a whole lot in that respect.
Right.
It may be that a household would benefit from first and last month's rent and security deposit to really
Sure.
help them get on their feet and kind of gain some
hmm
time so that they've got, a month or so to save up and make sure that they're
Right.
going to be able to make that monthly commitment.
That's
Um,
great. I mean, it's just there's this it's a lot more than just a bid, as I said earlier, and it's trying
right.
to work people through the process. And
Right.
I
There's
just know from internet research, Social Security disability, it's a year, probably a
mm,
year
right.
before you get
Yes,
some sort of determination. And so that leaves people in the lurch. I mean,
absolutely.
you all started as a soup kitchen and you still have a feeding program. So how many folks are you serving on a yearly basis and how does that work?
It's lately it's been about 120,000 or more hot meals in a year.
Wow.
In terms of the soup kitchen and the hot meals that we're serving through it, probably about 500 meals a day,
Okay.
would be our maximum. We First we feed the homeless adults and children who are
Hmm.
staying with us. And
Hmm.
so that's breakfast and dinner every night of the year. A smaller number of people, but that really adds up being every day of the week and of the year.
Hmm.
Lunchtime during the week, we also have a community meal for anyone who has a need for food. And so as a result, for sure, our unhoused population are welcome to avail themselves of that meal, and they do. But more so, it's elderly folks, it's folks
Hmm.
with disabilities, it's people on a fixed income, it's parents from the wider community who are housed, but once they pay for their rent, their utilities, their transportation, the medications in the household,
Hmm.
there just isn't enough with which to go buy not only food, but particularly like enough food and healthy foods. And
Right. Yeah.
sometimes kids are being handled at school, they're getting their meal there.
Hmm.
And we may only see mom during the week, but if mom can come to us for lunch and get a really substantial, well-balanced meal to help her through to the next day,
Hmm.
you know, the people around her might not realize it, but she may be skipping dinner to make sure there's enough for everyone else in the household.
Right.
And so kind of sustaining her in turn kind of sustains that family. And so we would never want someone to rely just on our lunchtime meal
Right.
as their only source of sustenance, but it really is a stopgap for folks, and we try really hard to make it both substantial and healthy and incorporate a lot of fresh vegetables and lean meats where we can. There is a lot of comfort food and dessert too
Yes.
in the mix. But but that is how we started over 40 years ago, was
Right.
a group of concerned neighbors banding together to feed other neighbors who they could see were struggling a bit and could use a hot meal.
Sure. One of the things that I read is of interest to me is that you have a second chance, a gleaning program. So I'm presuming you're working with supermarkets and others throughout the region.
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
it's a shame, but bruised banana will get thrown out, but you know what? A
Hmm.
bruised banana could become
Right.
someone else's
Right.
breakfast or a snack at lunch, etc.
Hmm. Hmm. One of the programs that really stood out to me when I first visited Good Shepherd over 20 years ago was the Second Helpings program.
Okay.
If you've whether as a student or as an adult, if you've ever worked in a restaurant
Hmm.
or a college dining hall, a lot of food gets thrown away, and some of
Yes.
it is very usable, to your point, like from a grocery store. And so I was really amazed, like how this little community had kind of figured out how to overcome that worry about
Hmm.
donating food. People always say,
Hmm.
well, what if someone claims that they got sick or what have you?
Right.
And I was always told, through North Carolina's Good Samaritan law, that really helped ease any worries about
Hmm.
making a donation of that
Sure.
sort. So what used to be a 5 morning a week volunteer program is now 7 mornings a week. So
Okay.
literally every day of the year, pretty much, we have a core of volunteers who go out to different grocery stores, sometimes a restaurant or a
Okay.
catering kind of place, but for the most part, grocery stores. And they collect and bring back to us very usable food that these partners
Hmm.
have set aside for us. And
Hmm.
I thought it was going to be the bruised apple and the kind of overripe banana and those kinds of things. It is amazing the quality and very saleable quality of the items that these partners are giving to us. It
Yeah.
is just an amazing quality. And so that comes back in, we weigh it, we have an accounting of everything that's
Sure.
donated to us, whether it's
Right.
literally a dollar or a can of green beans or what have you. Other volunteers sort through it. We use the majority of it to make those soup kitchen meals
Okay.
happen. We also
Okay.
create food boxes that are delivered once a week to some of our more vulnerable people who
Hmm.
we have ended their homelessness. We have helped them back to housing, but we worry, okay, now they're not easily going to be able to access the soup kitchen. And can this elder still get to the grocery store reliably? Are they able to cook enough for themselves? And so we create a box of grocery staples
Okay.
from those donations as well, and deliver those to some of those more fragile
Okay.
rehoused folks as an effort to kind of check on them and sustain their new housing. So that's another smaller
Hmm.
kind of food effort. We also, and this has really ramped up since the advent of COVID, we now have a pretty established weekly grocery giveaway every Wednesday. And so
Okay.
that's connected to that second helpings effort too,
Okay.
where 100 households or more can come over the course of an hour and literally just be
Right.
handed boxes of staples to take home and
Right.
to kind of boost up what they have to make meals from.
That's wonderful. I mean, one of the things that folks may not realize is that there's a need for wraparound services, whether it's medical or mental health and counseling, etc. So you all are involved with that because I just know from an experience that I had when I was living in Northern Virginia, we were collecting sweatsuits for veterans, and we went up
Hmm.
to the Veterans Hospital, and it was extremely cold weather.
Hmm.
And we were talking to the folks there, and they said, "Hey, look, thank you very much. Some of these folks have come in, but once it gets a little bit warmer, they leave.
Hmm.
They do not want to be inside, and so the services that you all provide are important. Maybe you could give us a little detail on the medical and mental health services that you help provide to folks."
Absolutely. It was over 20 years ago that we wanted to kind of experiment with having a very modest clinic on site.
Hmm.
And the idea was we never want to duplicate what someone else is doing, and especially what they specialize in and
Sure.
do well. But there was a thought that if we could co-locate a little clinic
Hmm.
with a space that homeless individuals, especially at that time, your more fragile, chronically homeless
Hmm.
folks, a place where they were already comfortable and familiar accessing,
Okay.
that maybe we would actually increase their access to those services and their comfort being open to those services. And so a little bit of an experiment in those early days. It was once largely a partnership with our county health department. In recent years, they sort of wished us well in creating a new partnership that's a bit more robust, and that's with Cape Fear Clinic, who really specialize in being a medical home
Okay.
for the underserved.
Hmm.
And so today, we not only still have that little clinic
Sure.
attached to the shelter, but folks are able to receive everything from wound care and first aid to lots of chronic condition
Sure.
diagnosis and follow-up and maintenance, medications that every day we have medications being dropped off, literally dropped off to our
Okay.
homeless guests here, for us to store for them and make available to them as needed, by virtue of the Cape Fear Clinic pharmacy. And
Okay.
so rather than always having to make another appointment to get that kind of standard refill, it's much more seamless. And they have much greater and more expedited connection to specialist services now.
Okay.
Someone who has a suspicious mass one day, in one case, in 10 days was before an oncologist getting the advanced care that
Sure.
she needed for a cancer. I mean, that just amazing. And a real bright spot is there was a time when I worried that in ending someone's homelessness, we were inadvertently cutting them off from these
Sure.
ancillary services, these wraparound services, right? Because at this point, we have rehoused literally thousands of people. So you can only follow everybody, but like so much.
Yes.
Um, but because it's Cape Fear Clinic now, our folks, whether their new housing is by the university or in
Hmm.
Leland or
Sure.
anywhere in our community, they can maintain Cape Fear Clinic as their
Okay.
medical home and continue to see their doctor,
Okay.
continue to get their medications. And
Right.
so there's no longer that worry of that unintentional disconnect. And
Sure.
actually, now we've given them a foundation of health and even help them see, it might actually be a learning for some of our 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds that you don't just have to come when you're sick or
Right.
injured. There is such a thing as wellness care. And just because you haven't had that for a long time doesn't mean that isn't something we can get you kind of on a schedule and in the habit of
Hmm.
accessing. So
Right.
that has been a
That's
real
great.
bright spot. Hmm.
Well, I think a big bright spot, and I was looking at the website, is your permanent housing facility
Hmm.
now, right? So maybe talk a little bit about that, and
Hmm.
you know, how does that work? How do people apply
Sure,
if they're so
sure.
interested, et cetera?
So it depends on the site. We've been tangentially involved in housing for a number of years. So over 25 years ago, we rehabbed a historic school building,
Okay.
and it had sat vacant for 20 years and it was in rough shape. And so for about 25 years now, it has had a couple of programs under one roof. It's called the Sergeant Eugene Ashley Center.
Hmm.
And so it primarily provides housing and supportive services to homeless veterans. So it's named after our local Medal of Honor recipient,
Okay.
uh, who, has been in high regard and a local hero, for decades.
Sure.
So our Ashley Center was our first foray into combining housing with services. And then many years ago, again, we're always trying to learn from, what are the best practices that are working in other areas of the country that we may not have tried, but are proving successful in moving the needle, especially with some of our more challenging shelter guests or
Sure.
unsheltered folks. And so that's where we learned about a best practice called permanent supportive housing. And
Hmm.
that's just a long way of saying or describing the marriage of an affordable apartment that just costs you 30% of your income, sliding to zero if you have none,
Okay.
combining that with some intensive on-site supports. And the way we've implemented that model is typically two full-time individuals, social workers, case managers,
Hmm.
who are involved in those residents' lives on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
So, Lakeside Reserve was the first development that we created from the ground up,
Hmm.
40 apartments that we developed expressly for that small group of the homeless population who they fit the stereotype. We tend to think
Hmm.
they're the majority. They're actually the smaller 10 to 20%. But they're the ones who are most visible. They're on the street. They get the most attention. They make people maybe the most uncomfortable.
Right.
Um, Almost to a person, they have some significant mental health and other, sometimes very significant medical and physical challenges. Usually they lost their housing because of those special needs, and understandably, they're going to have the hardest time getting back to housing and staying there. So supportive housing, in again, only charging someone 30% of their income, if they have disability assistance or Social Security and a very modest income, that still allows, the difference, the 70% toward other things that
Yes.
they might need. If they have no income, so be it. It is a
Okay.
way to get them off the street, out of the woods and what have you, which is not only an improvement in their quality of life, but I think an improvement for the community. Those case managers are connecting those residents to
Right.
other services that they need.
Right.
So you talked about, wraparound services. It's making sure if someone can't get to the grocery store on their own, that we are rallying people once or twice a week and together using a Good Shepherd van and going
Okay.
to grocery shopping, going to the pharmacy. We're taking people to their doctor's appointments. If on the ride home, you tell me that the doctor put you on a new medication, I'm going to seek you out tomorrow. You don't have to
Okay.
come to my office on site. I'm going to find a way to run into you or come and
Hmm.
find you and say, how is that going? And if you tell me, oh, I'm already confused about it, so I just didn't even take my medication today, I'm going to say, you know what? Come with me. Let's go back to my office. Let's call the nurse and get you on track with this.
Sure.
It's complicated and it's not complicated. Like on
Sure.
the one hand, it's not for the faint of heart. You are in our case, the developer, the landlord, the case manager, the all the things, right?
Sure.
Um, it is a lot of money to build such a thing. It is a heavier lift to subsidize the difference between those what those folks can afford and what it takes to operate
Right.
a property and keep it a very quality property and experience both for those residents and for the wider community. However, there's good evidence over a period of many years that for the community, it's actually less expensive to end people's homelessness that way and keep
Right.
them out of the ER, keep them out of other institutions,
Hmm.
keep them from cycling through any number of public services. And as a result, not 100% and not automatically, but pretty quickly, just by having stable housing and the supports, almost to a person, their mental health improves to some
Right.
degree, their physical health improves to some degree. And
Right.
it kind of makes sense. My medications are on the kitchen counter where I left them last night when I wake
Sure.
up, you know. And you've got people just kind of checking on you, you
Right.
know, um, you know, oh, you can't take public transportation to your colonoscopy. You need
Right.
a person. And
No.
all the folks we're serving, they lost their whatever family or social support they had, whatever sort of helpers they had in their lives have kind of fallen away
Yep.
over the years. And so sometimes our case managers are that too, again, making
Right.
sure that we're doing what we can to help help someone get back
Sure.
on their feet again in terms of their health, their mental health. But they can live in those housing settings for as long as it's working for them and it's working for us. We have a very pretty high threshold for behaviors because we know people are, if we're doing it right, they're kind of relearning what it is to be a renter.
Sure.
I pay my rent first before I give money to my niece who
Sure.
is asking me for help. Um, that's just a huge part of it. So Lakeside Reserve was our first foray into developing that
Okay.
ourselves. We had piloted 8 units of it at our Ashley Center. So Lakeside added 40 units. And then just a couple of weeks ago, we had the ribbon cutting for our latest supportive housing community called the Sparrow. And so
Okay.
that is adding another 32 units.
That's great.
Again, that crowd who are moving in from the woods, from the street, with a lot of support and a lot of relearning. You mentioned life skills.
Right.
How do if I only have $1,000 a month, I have to be even more savvy about how
Right.
I make my choices at the grocery store. Or I go to Walmart. I can't afford all my want tos yet. I have to focus on my have tos,
Sure.
all those kinds of things. So, it's a little scary. Nonprofits are not always encouraged to be risk takers, and we don't
Right.
want to be risk takers willy-nilly, but we want to make calculated investments, and we also want to challenge ourselves and risk making mistakes if there's a good chance we're going to move
Sure.
the needle for the people we're here to serve. And as a community, we just don't have a deep bench of providers who feel able to tackle
Right.
something like supportive housing. And so every so many years, we have kind of returned to that question of, well, if not us, then who? And do we have a responsibility to at least try to do more? So 32 are literally being filled with
Right.
residents as we speak. Some have been on the streets for the last 20 years.
Right.
Some, their needs were so great that their family literally kind of put them out on our lawn
All right.
some time ago, and they've been homeless for a long time. And without, again, this intensive kind of intervention, uh, these folks are not going to make it,
Sure.
homelessness
I was
again.
going to ask you, I mean, you all do a lot of work, and we only have a few more minutes left, but obviously volunteers are incredibly important for your organization. I suspect that if folks want to volunteer, they could just visit your website and fill out the form, and someone will be in touch.
Absolutely. That's a great way to start, to reach out to our volunteer and engagement manager,
Okay.
Emily. We usually start by arranging a time after people fill out the application for folks to come in and do an orientation. We're very intentional about that process so that
Okay.
we're giving people, some context for their service, and also just kind of giving them the lay of the land so that they
Sure.
can begin considering what might be a fit for them.
Hmm.
We like to think if we have enough going on that if one thing is not a fit, surely we have something else that might be meaningful to someone and fit their schedule, which we
Yeah.
think is the very best situation. But
Yep.
particularly in food services, we have all kinds of things that people can easily plug into,
Sure.
whether it's weekly or every once in a while. But we would love that opportunity to meet
Sure.
folks, and we also love people visiting just to see as a community what they have helped make possible for their neighbors in need.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. Listen, for those who are watching or reading the blog, please take a look at the website and take a chance to consider volunteering. A desperate need for all sorts of services across the region. And in the time of limited resources, it's the not-for-profits who are really picking up the social safety net. So, Katrina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Same here.